So sitting up straight and comfortable. And give your awareness to your breath. And feel the breath as it flows into your lungs. And feel the breath as you exhale and it merges with the environment around you. Be aware of your body and how your body feels in your meditation posture. And be aware of the breath as it flows through your body. And listen to the sounds within the room. To the space in which the sounds are occurring. And be aware of your current state of consciousness as you sit quietly and breathe and listen. And with each exhalation, give yourself permission and to relax more fully into this moment, free of attachment to your past, free of striving into a future. Existing right here and right now in this meditation hall. And give yourself permission to let go of all attachments, to let go of your false sense of self as a personality with likes and dislikes and a history. Experience yourself now as it is in this present moment. And now take a moment to honor and acknowledge everything that brought you here. Think of the teachers, the spiritual books, the grace that conspired to give you, present to you this experience. Feel the light within your heart that is the same light that shines in everyone. It shines as the being of all people you consider to be enlightened, all those free souls that help to uplift consciousness everywhere. Acknowledge that very light within your own heart. Because by being here, by honoring this light, you are also contributing to and supporting the awakening process for all beings throughout all time and space and beyond. So honor that light now within you as you breathe, as you listen, as you observe your current state of consciousness. And as we have a discussion today, exploring what is most appropriate to each of you now, do your best to hold your awareness on the breath, on the space around you, to listen and be present with your whole being. Let your mind and heart be clear and open to that grace, that absolute reality of which we are all a part and is our actual, timeless, true self. And when you're ready, take an easy, deep breath. On the exhale, relax, and you can open your eyes. Okay, good. So just out of curiosity, how many of you have been here before to CSA? None of you? Okay, I thought a few of you had. Well, welcome. This meditation hall, I don't know if you've noticed it, but if you've come in maybe late at night last night or early this morning, it's a pretty quiet place. And when we first had our meditation this morning, I was encouraging you to listen to the space around you and the space within the room. And maybe you've been in a church before or other meditation space where you can hear a constant tone or a constant sound. And there's a meditation technique or idea spoken of in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali about listening to the Om vibration, spoken of very early on in that text. And if you can hear this sound that I'm trying to describe to you, and you can hold your awareness on it and let it grow, this is one of the best meditation techniques that you can actually experience. In the Yoga Sutras, it says that by listening to Om, all obstacles are removed. All obstacles are removed. And they're speaking of the obstacles to your realization, to your understanding, to knowing and being your clearest, eternal sense of self. Interestingly enough, many of you know that I'm also a Vedic astrologer, and Ganesh, maybe you've seen the elephant-headed god. There's a statue of Varun here somewhere, I think in the back of the room there. But he is said to be a representation of the remover of all obstacles. And we have to remember that when we think about these Hindu gods and goddesses, that they are really aspects, powers of the one absolute individualized consciousness, individualized absolute consciousness, both in this time-space continuum, as well as beyond, where our minds can't quite understand. So the gods and goddesses are powers of this absolute. And Om, from a Vedic astrological standpoint, is said to be associated with Ganesh, or the sound of Ganesh. And that's why when people pray, when people are seeking knowledge and wisdom, they pray to Ganesh, or they do mantras to Ganesh to kind of invoke this power that removes obstacles to realization. But one of the most intense ways of doing that is learning to hear this sound. Did any of you hear it at all this morning? Do you know what I'm talking about? This constant tone? Well, next time you come in, if you didn't, before you do anything, before you think of anything at all, just walk into the room and listen and see if you can hear this sound. And then sit down and just focus, keep your awareness on this sound. And it's subtle. So it's one of the most simple yet difficult meditation techniques you can do. But if you can hold your awareness on it, essentially what starts to happen is it grows louder and deeper, and all of those thoughts, all of those distractions, all those things that keep you thinking you're a small sense of self, they all fade away. My first experience with this just happened to be the very first time I came to CSA, almost 20 years ago, this past August. And it happened when we were doing the Kriya Yoga initiation ceremony, where Roy taught the Kriya Yoga techniques, and then the blessing was shared. And I'm assuming we're going to do it the same way this time. But 20 years ago, the way it worked out was the techniques were shared. Roy would describe the Kriya Yoga techniques, and then the individuals would bring up a fruit, a flower, and a donation. And the purpose of that was to represent, the fruit is about giving up all of your karma to the higher power, the guru, God, divine consciousness. The flower is said to represent your devotion to the path, your devotion to the path. And the donation, while it helps to support CSA and the fact that we have this wonderful meditation hall and all these grounds, the symbolism behind the donation is that you are dedicating all of your resources to your own awakening. That's the key. You are dedicating all your resources to your own awakening. Now, of course, churches and maybe other organizations have pushed that a little too far to support big things and big structures. But what we have to think about is, after we've gone through initiation, the goal is that whatever we do with our resources, with our energy, with our time, it's meant to be directed towards our own awakening process. That doesn't mean you can't go to the movies and enjoy a night with your spouse. It doesn't mean you can't have hobbies. It simply means that everything that you do as though you are dedicating that activity to your awakening process. And even things like hobbies and entertainment, within reason, helps to keep you happy and calm and healthy, which also contributes to your awakening process. So, point being, the fruit, the flower, the donation, they all represent a commitment to your awakening path. Now, back to the story. After we went through this, put down the fruit, the flower, the donation, and Roy was standing here, and you walk by, and he put his hand on my head, and that was significant of the blessing and the idea of initiation, the new beginning. And you just walk around and sit down again and meditate quietly as everyone goes through the process. And that's essentially what happens when you go through the initiation. And then right after that, Roy tends to, or at least he did then, he would bake some kind of goodie. It was, I think it was a cheesecake of some sort at that time. And you all went into the dining hall and just enjoyed each other's company and had the cheesecake. And after that was all over, I walked up to the Temple of All Faiths, which is that building right up here, the octagon with the stained glass window of various faiths. And I sat down Japanese style, so with my legs folded. And all of a sudden, there was a sense, a feeling, maybe you remember when you would look at old TVs, and when you'd turn it off, how the screen would kind of collapse on itself and make a line. You know what I'm talking about? Well, anyway, it was like the opposite of that. It was as though this line of light kind of cut through here, and then all of it went up, as though the TV was being turned on. And it kept going and kept expanding, and I became aware of this sound, this constant tone, and it got louder and clearer and louder until that's all I was aware of, was this sense of light and this sense of sound. And I don't know how long it lasted. I would say probably 5 to 10 minutes. But then when it concluded, I was just back to my normal self, and I sat up. I had no idea what that was, because at that time I hadn't really read the Yoga Sutras. This was my first experience here at CSA, so I did not have a whole lot of history studying these things. And it wasn't until later when I realized what had actually happened during that moment. And then every time I would come into this room, particularly this space here, I would hear a very faint quality of that sound. And if I could, simply focus on my breath and listen, again, just as though I was trying to hear what that sound was and what was behind that sound, while keeping my attention here and here, I was able to recreate, to a degree, that experience. And what I always found was, when I was able to do that, I felt lighter and freer and clearer afterwards. The trouble was, it was so consistent of how it affected my life and my meditation. But maybe you've experienced this too, where you kind of know you need to sit down and meditate, or you need to do something to calm down and get focused, but you don't. You have some resistance to it. So what I found was I had to make myself notes to tell myself to sit down and learn to listen to this sound, because it always improved whatever my meditation techniques were, whatever was going on in my life. So I'm sharing this with you, so that as you're sitting here this week, if you can at times be here when it's quiet and learn to hear that sound, try to remember how it works for you. And then when you're at home, when you're doing your own meditation practice, you can also train yourself to do that. One thing I found was that sometimes you get, what's the word? Not comfortable, but familiar with the energy of your own meditation space. Or if you're at CSA long enough, you also get familiar with the energy of this space. So it doesn't necessarily seem to have the most profound effect the longer you're here. It's because you're getting used to it. And I mention this because I noticed recently, as I was up in West Virginia for about a month, setting up a new home, I came back to my condo in Asheville. And you know, Melissa and I had lived there for 10 years, and I spent most of my days there, and I meditated quite a bit there, and so did she. And I found that as soon as I walked into the condo, I heard it again. I could hear that sound because of previous practices in that area. So you want to realize that you're learning to hear this sound, and it's going to take a little more effort the more familiar you get with a particular kind of spiritual state or spiritual space. One thing that can be very helpful is earplugs, actually. Because when you use earplugs, all you are aware of is the sound of your nervous system, and that in and of itself can be, it can be an access point for learning to hear this Om vibration. Another thing is chanting Om aloud for a good amount of time. I have a Shruti box, which is the drones on a harmonium, I think Yogananda played to do all his chants. It's just the drones, and I'll pump that, and I'll chant Om to that constant tone out loud, and I've noticed that when I quit, it makes it easier to hear that sound. So from the very beginning of all of this, I would really like to encourage you to start contemplating, considering, what is this Om vibration? What is this sound, and how can I get into it? Because if you start now, it will just continue to develop through the duration of your path, until eventually it becomes easy to hear the sound and just essentially dissolve your awareness in it. Now, one last bit on this before I get into what I actually wanted to talk about today, is that being relaxed is the key to this. Now, when I say relaxed, I'm very glad that none of you nodded off and started snoring, because sometimes that happens when you get a group of people meditating together. But by being relaxed, I simply mean that you're able to sit up, focus on the breath, and just let go as much as possible of any tension, of any sense of stress, while staying awake. That is the key, staying awake. When you can do that, when you get into a profound state of relaxation and you can listen, it'll be much easier for you to hear that sound. Similarly, what I've experienced and many others have experienced too is that when you start to hear that sound, oftentimes, as long as you're relaxed, and you keep your awareness here at the spiritual eye center as though you're gazing out through that space, oftentimes you will be able to see a radiant light, a bright light here. In the beginning, it might look like shifting colors or patterns or a haziness or even maybe dark blue or dark purple. But the more you're able to relax, listen, and hold your awareness here, occasionally you will get almost as if, it looks to me at least, like you're catching a glimpse of sunlight over a mountain. That's the way it always looks to me. It's always like when I've been out in nature and I've seen the sun setting or rising, it'll flash into your awareness. And the more you're able to watch it and relax into it, it grows stronger and more steady, and you can dissolve your attention into that as well. Now, that relaxation and alertness, that is the point of these meditation techniques that we do. The Sushumna breathing, Soham mantra, chanting through the chakras, it's all about pulling your awareness in, keeping you alert yet relaxed, so that you can merge with the rest of you, the rest of your consciousness, beyond this mind, this body, and this nervous system. Because the nervous system is simply like a radio antenna which is processing consciousness. And the clearer, more refined that nervous system through our meditation practices, the easier it is for us to realize what we are beyond our personality, our body, and our mind. And that's what we're aiming for here. Okay? Now, I'm sure we'll talk more about this as the week goes on. But this is something I'd really, really encourage you to start thinking about, contemplating, and trying to feel your way through while you're here this week in this particular kind of space, because it'll be more supportive in this space. All right, so before I move on to, again, my actual topic that I had in mind, any questions or comments about what we just discussed? And we'll just go around the room, and if you don't have anything to say, say, I'm good. Otherwise, go ahead and speak up.